All right, welcome to the podcast for the best group in Mr. Shaver's section three. This is the group of small schools, so we each have our own different school. Um, we've prepared, our own kind of demographics. So, Alexis, if you want to start with that, it's all yours.
Yeah. So I was placed in it's in Hartford City, Indiana.
Oh,
And overall our schools are kind of similar to one another. Hartford City is also a small rural school. It has a student teacher ratio of 14 to 1, and the estimated amount of students is around 717. The school around the community, they do face economic challenges. Over 50% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. And it has a high poverty rate of almost 22%. The school also has an issue with integrating technology. Only around 78% of people in Hartford City, which is the surrounding area, have access to internet. So it leaves a lot of our students without that ability to be connected to the internet. If anybody wants to talk about their school needs.
Yeah, I can hop on that.
yeah.
Or Connor, if you want to go, that's
You
fine.
got it.
All
Go for it.
right. So I had this little small school in the middle of Henry County. It's south of Middleton, Indiana. Um, in terms of just overall demographics, um, student wise, there's about 394 white students compared to 16 minority students. Okay. Out of those about 400-ish students. 163 are eligible for free reduced lunch. The school is primarily made of freshmen. I think that's going to be something we see amongst a lot of our schools. Um, Freshman class is the biggest by about 30-ish students, 20-ish students. Um, Gender-wise, we see it to be about 210 to about 200 male to female. Um, and then some things that have been going on in my school, they're trying to do a lot more publicity. So they're trying to get that name out. They're adding a lot of extracurriculars. For example, one of the most recent ones they added was an esports team, which is going to tie in a lot to our topic today. In that esports team, they actually went to like state and they were like second in the state, which is really big for a small school like this. Um, that's about all I have for my school. I will say we also did just receive a grant 2 years ago. So something that's kind of unique to my school is every school or every student, every teacher has a MacBook. Typically, we don't see that in a lot of schools because MacBooks are expensive. Um, so I think that's really interesting to see, and I think that's been something really interesting to kind of compare, like what you guys have. I think most of you guys have Windows slash Chromebooks. I had a Chromebook in high school, so seeing those kind of differences, and I think that was a really nice aspect to bring to the table. But that's about all I have for my introduction. Connor, Anthony, when do you guys want to go next?
Yeah. So I had a very, very small school in a town of less than 1,000 people as well. So there's some interesting demographic breakdowns. To start, there's a vast majority white, of course. And then uh the age ranges are pretty spread out. There's no um super one above the other. Gender ratio is about 50-50. Um, the demographics of the school themselves, there's about 400 white students, and then one black student, one Asian student, one Native American student, and five multiracial, and then 16 Latinx. Um, so not a whole super diverse school there. But their socioeconomic status, 52% is actually on free and reduced lunch, which is pretty high. Um, and there's only about 430 students in both middle and high school. So very, very small. Um, but all in all, it seems to be a pretty standard rural area of Indiana. Um, it's very focused on sports, of course. But there's definitely a lot of technological need in there. Not so much in the need of the technology itself, but how to understand it. Um, as students in a growing world of technology, they definitely need some support there. But that's the background on my school.
When it comes to, although it is a cornfield school and it is pretty rural, it is a little bit bigger than your guys's. Around 800 kids, give or take. It's a pretty similar demographic, though. I think it's like 93% white, and a couple of percentage mixed in with African Americans, and very small Mexican population. But when it comes to like technology use and money, they have pretty good funding. They spend a lot of money on their sports facilities, so they have some brand new stuff like that. And they have decent technology. All their students have their own Chromebooks and stuff like that. There are some smart boards, but there aren't very many. And from what I've seen, is there's not a lot of applications for what I've seen. The kids rarely use their Chromebooks outside of just Canvas, and that goes just for my history class and other classes, from what I've heard from the students. So this is something to think about as we go forward.
All right, I love to hear that. So now we have kind of an overall aspect of how each of our schools work. Together, we all kind of did our own separate, I say together and separate in the same sentence. That's great. We have all done interviews with administration. I did mine with my principal and assistant principal. And I think together we have come up with this, I'm going to say universal, but problem that all of our schools kind of brought up, at least in some manner, some aspect throughout those interviews. Um, Alexis, I believe you're the one that said you were going to cover the problem. It's all yours.
Yeah, so we kind of came up with this same idea that all of these schools, while like some of them don't receive adequate funding, based on just numbers, they don't receive as much funding as like a place like Yorktown or Anderson. They just can't compare in that way. But a lot of these schools are having issues with integrating technology and having the funding for it. So like for example, I had my meeting with the high school principal, and most of the teachers have projectors or like out of dated computers that don't really work. Some of them have BenQ boards, which are like smart boards, but it kind of just shows like the economic disparity. We kind of all had the same kind of notion about that, that all of these communities have. And it just limits resources for our students and for our teachers. And like when thinking about it in a rural context, rural schools, they face geographic and infrastructure barriers. A lot of these schools can't support different integration of technology, and it makes it harder for our students to connect to these issues and to digital learning outside of the classroom even. And it just kind of widens the divide between rural education students and those that live in urban areas.
Yeah. So boom, problem. Why is this technology integration, technology being used in the classroom important? That's something that I think all of us kind of brought up in our conversation is um, figuring out where do we go if, we don't have it yet. If we do get it, how are we going to use it type of thing? Because like Anthony mentioned, what's the point of having, if teachers have smart boards, they're not being used. Students have Chromebooks, used very little, not to their full potential. I have found a couple of articles that kind of highlight some of the importance of technology. And I think most of these guidelines will hit for all of our subject areas. That's what I was kind of going for. One of the ones that I found that I really enjoyed, it's from the School of Education from American University. It's in DC, and it talks about collaboration. And I think, looking at education through the past, I mean, even 10 years, we've seen just an overall communication decline between interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships in the school. That kind of really peaked during 2020, 2021. Um, but that's something that technology can kind of help with. It opens up a lot of new doors for communication. For instance, right now we're communicating via Zoom. None of us are in the same place, probably not even within 5 miles of each other. Um, so this is kind of one of those ways that technology can just boost that communicational divide. Um, and I don't know if you guys have anything to kind of add on that. If you do, feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that technology adds in the classroom. I mean, obviously it's not going anywhere. We're still kind of in the first 20 or so years of technology in the classroom. But one of the things we talked about a lot in classes is differentiation, and technology is a great tool for that. And I think that a lot of teachers don't really utilize it like that. And that's something I've really struggled as just in my practicum is finding ways to get technology involved and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just going to add on to differentiation. That's one of those topics that, you'll spend all semester talking about and it'll never go away. It'll consistently be changing, just as technology does. Just to like tie that in. But this is just an example of like what I used it for. So when I was doing my unit plan, we did this little virtual escape room. Um, and one of the ways that I decided to kind of try and incorporate technology is I used like a Google form type of thing. So the actual escape room didn't have to be necessarily super in depth. It wasn't, I mean, extremely hands-on. It was more working with your group to try and reach this common goal, common answer. Um, and I asked the kids at the end, I was like, hey, how'd you guys feel about that? Like, do you think that you had everything that you needed to succeed with just on your screen? They all said yes. So I was like, fantastic, fabulous type of thing. Um, do y'all have any examples or anything like that?
Yeah, in my unit, I try to teach as paperlessly as possible already, just because like if we're doing like research tasks or things like that, like I had them read a couple articles and I could have printed like two 30-page articles 22 times and wasted all that paper. But having the access to Schoology and things like that and programs like that for students is, I think, key because they were able to just access those articles right away. I also have a shared drive. So I use that so all of their assignments are just done on a single Google Doc, and then they just submit all of that to me by sharing it with me at the end. And it's just a really seamless way to have it done and out of the way without having to submit like 4 or 5 different things throughout the unit or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. So that kind of brings us to we've been talking about how we've kind of seen it and how we've used it. Um, Part of how we also kind of wanted to gather some information with some data. Our good man Connor here put together a Google form that was sent out to different teachers throughout our building or throughout our buildings. Connor, if you want to talk about
Yeah.
those results.
Yeah, so I got a okay amount of responses. Luckily I asked the questions in a way that is more like obviously we had to have like set ways to graph their responses. So there were
Mhm.
responses with yes, no, there were responses with out of 5. But they always had the opportunity to explain because as teachers, we find it hard to just say yes or no. Um, so without further ado, 66% of teachers found that technology is beneficial in the classroom. The leftover percentage mostly just cited things like needing balance within technology and that there is potential, but maybe students misuse it sometimes, or like it can become the focus of a lesson too easily and not a tool for the lesson. Um, when asked if they believe they could do more with technology to enrich their classroom, 75% said yes, and 25% said maybe. Nobody said no. Um, and their explanations mainly consisted of things like not having time to implement technology better, or maybe like some of them said like in a math classroom it's not super practical to use too much technology since it's so hands-on. Um, but most everybody admitted like yes, I could probably do more here. Um, they all have school issued technology. Nobody goes out of pocket. Um, when asked if they feel they have an adequate amount of technology, 41% said yes. Um, but still most everybody said things like, I could have more, but I get why I don't. So maybe that's why they answered 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. Um, they also, when asked if how well they feel they understand the technology in their classroom, 50% gave it a 4 out of 5, and 33% gave it a 5 out of 5. Um, and then that kind of just shows to me like um they have a decent understanding of it, but you don't know what you don't know. So maybe there's things they don't get that they don't even realize is out there for them. Things like that. Um, they've a bit more spread out of an answer when asked how they would rate the training they've received. 33% gave it a 5 out of 5, 25% gave it a 4, 25% gave it a 3, 16.7% gave it a 2. So a bit of a wide range there. But when asked if more in-depth training would be provided if they'd go to it, 41% said yes, 50% said maybe, probably depending on what they would get out of the training. When asked what they would like to get out of the training, most of them are just asking for small tips and tricks. They don't need a whole overhaul. They just need a little bit more push. So they just need like a bit better understanding of the bin queues. Most of them are saying just the different tools that are available through the bin queues. Um, but most everybody wants to advance their teaching through technology. So good news there. That was the whole survey that was sent out.
Hey, you killed that, my man. I think I can speak for the other three of us. Um, Hats off, my man. Um, so that's kind of our data. That was a really good explanation. Um, and so I think it's time we kind of talk about the final product, right? Um, so I was looking at some prices, and I think it's important to talk finances before we talk grants. Um, price wise, the I'm going to say the least expensive one. I'm not going to say cheap, but least expensive one that I saw for instructor moderated program was 170 bucks. That's just to teach teachers how to use the technology that they have. Um, Not so much obtaining new stuff. Obtaining new stuff, it's going to kind of depend on what you want to get. For example, my school, when they got MacBooks, was a couple couple grand, right? Like we're talking about 100 grand, um, if not more. Um, but those were the instructive moderated ones. I also saw there was some virtual ones. Virtual ones costed a little more. I guess convenience has its fee. Running at about 185. So still not terrible. But I know my man Anthony over here has found some great grants that may apply for what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, just a few minutes into research, I found like a pretty popular one that's been widely spread across Indiana. It's on the Indiana DOE, and it's simply called the. Let me see if it'll load here. The digital learning grant. I mean, it's pretty simple, and it really just applies to a wide array of issues, in terms of using technology in the future, in terms of improving technology in the classroom. It's funded by the state government, and one of the good things about it that I saw is that they actually show the previous schools that have been awarded this grant. And from 2024, there's close to 100 schools, I'd say, and there were even a lot of schools I'm familiar with. Yorktown, actually, right around here, was one of the schools that got this grant. What they use it for, I'm not sure. But some of the things that apply to this, we talked about in terms of our data collection. A lot of the issues where teachers felt comfortable with the amount of technology they had, but they weren't really familiar with how to use it, or they weren't really familiar with any tools that they could use. So it's kind of a trade-off here. And this grant right here applies to a wide array of things. I'll list a couple of them. Actually, on the grant office, it says that these proposals that include these topics are given priority. So these issues right here will be up on the list if we put that in our grant proposal. Artificial intelligence platforms, game-based learning, another way you can differentiate. Immersive learning experiences, another tool. Adaptive software programming for personalized learning. Innovative and research-based personalized things. A lot of these tools that you can use to improve the use of technology. Assistive technology for special populations, which is a pretty hot topic now. Digital literacy programs, which is a really hot topic, especially we talked about that in one of our history classes. That's really important for students to learn about. Could be very important for implementation. Blended and virtual learning segments and universal design for learning, stuff like that. Really great tools that really hit on a lot of wide uses for technology. So we all have different schools and unique backgrounds and unique teachers. There's something in here for pretty much everybody. There's also, they have an additional section here. These funds can also just use for the purchase of hardware. So we all have computers at our schools. That's a good start. But this grant could also be used for like the software, like smart boards and tools and software within the computers that can help you use technology in the classroom. And also, one of the big things we talked about in the data collection was training of the teachers. This grant can be used for the cost of hiring the trainers. The quote right here says the cost related to hiring knowledgeable trainers and/or speakers, offering professional learning opportunities to support educators and students in implementation. So one of the big issues with training and professional development for these teachers was they obviously some were worried about time and stuff like that, but paying the trainers or paying for the service, this grant right here applies to it, and it's pretty wide grant. And also in terms of price wise, each school can get up to $50,000, and it's open to any public school corporation in the state, which all of our schools apply for perfectly. And it's pretty widely granted. I think it's for any school that is having issues with technology implementation or wants to get technology more involved in the future. I think it'd be a great grant to apply to and at least get some funding. You might not get the 50,000, but you'll definitely get a large chunk of change, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that kind of sums up our little talk here. Anybody else have anything to add on? Love that for us. Hey, round of applause. Again, best group in the section. Anybody wants autographs, catch us next semester. Hey, thank you for listening. I'm assuming Dr. Shaver. We appreciate your time. Thank you for everything that you've given us in class, and we are out of here.